Ms. Anand. As always, what a pleasure to have you here with us today, ma'am. Ma'am, like has been the theme of the event, we'd like to begin with asking you one thing that you'd like to change about the current legal framework, or any of the laws about women in India as of date. What is it? If you could choose one thing, would you change immediately?
Ashima, thanks in any case for having me on this program, and I'm delighted to be part of the International Women's Day in the business world and with you. But let me tell you, there are so many changes that have happened in the past. So when I sit back to think about it, how many more changes can we do? So I'll make just one preliminary statement, which must come to focus. While we pay so much attention to gender diversity and to gender equality and these issues and women empowerment, I must say that we mustn't always have laws or even possibly judicial precedents necessarily, which only talk about gender issues and on that basis proceed on that level. Because sometimes too much advancement, supposedly in the name of a cause, gets to be over possessive. I must put this caveat somewhere in the beginning of this conversation. But having said that, as I said, there have been changes through the law, or whether it's inheritance, whether it's succession, whether it is rape, whether it's sexual assault. So we've been having a complete Pandora's box literally coming out with legislative changes in this country. And we have evidences from 1980 specifically, I would say 1980s marked the trend upwards. But one of the issues that I think could do with a tremendous amount of involvement, and hasn't been so, is the economic, the contribution of women in the household and in the family. I think that is still something which has not been notioned as a feature which should go into the asset evaluation, and in the event of a dispute, divided between, let us say, the husband and the wife, because the contribution, the economic contribution of a woman as a housewife is something which is not considered. It has been mooted several times by Ashima, by the way, but it just hasn't seen the light of day. And I think in today's time and age, see, all said and done, empowerment of women is across several surfaces. So that stems across from physical security to economic security to mental security. So in each of these directions, if you look across on the economic platform in particular, which leads itself to a tremendous amount of empowerment, what and how do you bring in this feature in the Indian law to enable a just justification for women contribution as citizens, as a member of the household, as a member of the family? So I think that's a very important issue that must come into play. And even though you asked me one, I'll mention a second, which is the political hemisphere. I think the political involvement again is something which is essential, because you have to be policy makers. When you talk about women in several roles, I know we talk across professions, we talk across different businesses, we talk about corporate life. You even have had law which empowers or other mandates you must have a woman director in every company. Now, these kind of policies have come into being. But for political contribution, even though it's a very wide debate as to whether you should have reservation, I will leave that subject there for another day. But the way things are and the kind of representation there is, we are somewhere between 14% in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, which of course there has been a tremendous enhancement from the past, but unfortunately still not enough. And until you have women as equal seekers in the whole bargain, and there is lack of opportunity. So you have to basically go beyond that initial stage to let women come in the forefront, and particularly as policymakers, so that they can actually be part of the mainframe. To have women as part of the mainframe is a very important function of the country, of the world, as a thought process. And I think that's where we need to really build upon. It is something again which has been pending for almost since 1986, and it is seen in the House of Parliament 6 times over, but it just hasn't seen the light of day. And there is commitment from everybody towards this direction. So all political parties by and large have been mooting it, but the need to have it, the need to fast forward the entire steps to have that kind of gender balance across the surface is something that I think is very important.
So true, ma'am. Like you mentioned that, so much has already happened and we're moving in the right direction. But yes, so much more could see the light of the day, and maybe more, expedited action on that would be great. Another question to you, ma'am, is in the state, what has been the state of women's access to justice given the pandemic? Would you please share some of your, probably cases or what you're hearing around? How have things, uh, like they say, there are stats that, the pandemic has set us back by maybe 10 years or 20 years in terms of access to justice to just women. Now, there have been stats that say that the domestic violence has increased threefolds and with no recourse in sight for people. So, what has happened in the year past, and what do you think is the way forward?
See, Ashima, you're right. The pandemic is a feature which has taken the country backwards in more than one direction. And definitely, access to justice by itself, even though very wide, and we have done tremendously well in providing access to justice through the surface, from Supreme Court down to the trial courts. Nonetheless, yes, there has been tremendous barriers to access to justice, and definitely women being in that sense a more marginalized section to suffer the consequences as one feature. The second feature, of course, is that mental stress and confinement and the lockouts have created tremendous situations of increased not only domestic violence for our women but also possibly for our children, but more so in that direction because stress itself has its own bearing. And by the way, that is another feature that we must concentrate on because I think the assistance to women would be far higher if you're able to concentrate also on the mental stress parameters, which we have not been able to do as much. And I do understand to some extent the reason, but at the same time, I don't lose sight of the significance of it. When we are talking across, by the way, across various countries, we find that most countries have come out with positive solutions to encompass these mental stress conditions. So coming back, the mental stress issues definitely have devastated women in more ways than one. And the confinement has aggravated those positions. And it has been difficult for women to access courts, not because they are women, but because access to courts itself has been restricted in various ways. So I would say that obviously the natural corollary would be that, and particularly when you're talking about domestic violence. But also I'll share with you one interesting feature. I was reading an article about doctors and hospitals, and somebody said that nobody is dying anymore of anything but of COVID. I'm talking about the earlier days of COVID, or that nobody is having heart attacks. So you do have priorities being given by circumstances to situations. So to some extent, there has been lessening of people wanting to go to court. To some extent, there has been restrictions for women, definitely, because all such cases would not be taken up. But we must mention also that there is also the lesser need of people to necessarily access because other issues have taken priority or precedence over these issues. So at the same time, I also noticed from the NCW, the National Commission for Women's Statistics and other complaints, that a large number of complaints were received and were tackled. Courts, however, yes, there were restrictions. So I guess we are talking at a time now that we are opening up in more ways than one. I mean, for example, the Delhi High Court. I just mentioned the Delhi High Court because that is planning on 15th of March. So as we speak, and trial courts have by and large opened up for the civil courts in various parts of the country as well as the high courts. The Supreme Court is also considering the options, and particularly for the benefit of lawyers, and this is not for women or men, but for lawyers in general, for the young lawyers. So I guess, yes, that will happen. But another feature that has created problems is also financial issues, because what happens is access to courts by itself requires expenditures, it requires consulting lawyers, it requires even court fees at times and various other factors. So even those issues which have come in because of the COVID pandemic have restricted the access of women to justice. And I think definitely we need to have some kind of bolstering up system so that as and when the courts are opening up their normal processes, there should be quicker access provided in terms of whether it's helpline, whether it is NCW, whether it is complaints, whether it's a police. See, take another feature. How does a woman, in cases of criminality, for example, let us say section 498A or 406, actually physically go to the police station? You can't. So there have been these features which unfortunately there were no answers to. But adverse times being adverse situations, and I guess we will be over those pretty soon as and when we have the functioning fully.
That's encouraging and promising to know, Ms. Anand. And like we know that equality is enshrined in our constitution, obviously, and you open with a statement, a disclaimer. But what positive discrimination would you say is needed, or say not needed, to bring women, to empower women more?
I told you, Ashima, that first statement, you're right. I'm glad you pointed it out because I do think that India has been making far reaching changes in legislature, in policies. We've actually had changes across the board. So, whether, as I said, for example, let's take the Hindu undivided family, where the woman is not entitled to have a right to vote. Now, 2005 saw that amendment of the Hindu Succession Act, for example, which entitled women to be co-partners, which made women, in fact, to be co-partners.
Yeah.
Subsequent judgments have made it even wider to say it is retrospective and it is not only prospective because it is beneficial. So the whole, take women's commissions in the army, in the air force, in each of the forces. I think that is one of the grandest changes, honestly. It is something that we've been fighting for, to say that this should be something which comes into focus, because you allow, my belief is that we must allow women to do what they can do, where they can excel, where they can contribute. It should be a matter of choice. And choice is dictated by the necessary education, by the necessary access, not only to, let us say, the profession itself, but to health facilities, to the educational part of it, to social infrastructure. Now, very often, for example, I would find that women will not undertake an assignment because of some kind of physical impediment or the other. I can't go out at night, or it is not safe, or I can't drive a car, or I am nervous. Now, these kind of features are something that we have to work out of our systems. And the only way we can work it out is if we move together. But equality-wise, honestly, even Domestic Violence Act. Now, I was there for the case Hiralal Harsora in Supreme Court, where the court categorically said that you can have perpetration against a woman by a woman. You can have perpetration by a male. Interpretations have been made by the courts on a positive line. The government, for example, has really focused so well on the policies relating to women, and it has had a very big reflection on the number of women who are coming forth as voters. And this 2014 election saw that, 2019 election saw that. So the difference between women and men voters, for example, forget the leaders, has been less than 2%. I mean, that is something which is phenomenal. The idea being, you don't only need to exercise power as professional leaders or political leaders or as industry leaders. You need to exercise your powers of your mind, of your skills, of your capacities, of your being a citizen. And I think these kind of changes which are brought about, whether you talk about Sardar Greh, you talk about Ujjwala scheme, you talk about the constitution. Our constitution is one of the most equal constitutions that exists in the world. India saw voting rights for women right from the beginning of the constitution. It is something that was never denied. I feel very unhappy making it as a positive statement, in a sense. All others should have done it. But what I am saying is that India has been definitely one of the most equal, and every possible constitutional interpretation that has come subsequently has been proactive and pragmatic and always leans in favor of women. And I think increasingly the judiciary, by and large, has been sensitive, by and large, is proactive, and by and large, interpreted in favor of women. The lacunas are more in procedures, on people to people action. So it really starts somewhere there, where you need to have more education, where you need to have more maturity, where you need to have more acknowledgement, where you need to have lesser egos, maybe. So whichever way you go, the whole balance seems to be that we need to function far more principally on our upbringing right as children upwards. You can climb a tree, you may fall down, but so may a boy. I think that's where it goes. And as I said, I always appreciate Modi ji's starting as a Prime Minister on addressing women's issues, including even issues of sanitation and toilets, as a primary feature, because access really builds you. You cannot do something like Justice Leela said. She's no more, and she's one of the grandest Chief Justices of the High Court that we had, and the first, of course. She mentioned while she was going to the Bihar High Court, there wasn't a ladies' toilet. Now, you may say this is somewhat of a smaller issue, but really it isn't. So, for example, the scheme that government has brought about for sanitation, for Swachh Bharat, is something that has led women on to empowerment. Now, there is a linkage between each of these features, and this is the way we have to go.
So very well pointed out, Ms. Anand. So much, such positive things to look at, and how we've come this far, and obviously so much more we can accomplish by just those few initiatives and thoughts, led of course by the government and then taken on by people. When when the prime minister says that share a photo with your daughter or do this or that, and those kind of thoughts from leaders like you and others in the industry do make a dent on people, and they take it forward. So it's just about putting that seed of thought, I believe, and then nurturing it further. So thank you so much for sharing those lovely thoughts with us and bringing to light so much that's actually probably gone unnoticed, because we hear of all the things that are not happening and lose focus on what is actually happening. So thank you so much for sharing that, Ms. Anand. And one thought that you would like to leave our women with, in general and in law, what would be your piece of advice to them?
Okay, everything in life is built upon broadly determination, broadly acknowledging yourself, acknowledging your own imperfections, if at all, the confidence that you are able to exude, and all said and done, the hard work that you put into your work. One of the important features that I do think that we do need to think as women, as for lawyers in particular, is there are a number of issues where we feel that we are endangered or we are threatened. There is actually nothing of that kind. It is only our perceptions or perceptions built from time to time. So we have to dispel those notions not only for others, but even for ourselves. And if we are able to demonstrate, I believe that very strongly, if we are able to demonstrate that career path is an important path for us, then everybody also will acknowledge you in those terms. So it's your own acknowledgement, which is very often translated in the minds of others, who then treat you with the same respect that you want to be treated with. I think that's where one of my most important thoughts would be. And there is nothing that can't be done. It is only the will, the desire, the dedication, the energies. And I think law needs a lot of energy, by the way. So we should not feel hampered in any manner by lack of energy. We have it almost as much as anybody else does. So each of these features builds into your coming up as a lawyer and making it there. See, ultimately, how you come to the top, how you're able to make your way through there is always a checkered path. There's no easy path. There may be some people who have some benefits which translate themselves. I am a first generation myself, so I know in a sense how hard it is. At the same time, the hard part didn't seem so hard. One just worked at it and went on from, as they say, ek meel ke patthar se dusre meel ke patthar tak. You kind of went going there and it kept proceeding along that line. And finally, you do manage to see the end of the tunnel and some light there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anand. In fact, one of the trending hashtags for the year 2021 in theme of, on the theme of Women's Day, International Women's Day, has been choose to challenge. So I think that's what women are best at. And I think if it's going to carry on for a little longer, we should actually continue to do so. So thank you so much, Ms. Anand, for joining us today and sharing your lovely thoughts. It's always so wonderful to hear from you, and for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashima. You're a tremendous woman.